It all began in the grey dawn of a ruined battlefield, where silence felt louder than any gunfire. A lone Ukrainian soldier crept through the smoke, his uniform smeared, his face hardened not just by dirt but by resolve. He wasn't wearing his true colors. Instead, he bore the insignia of his enemy, disguised as a Russian soldier moving across a zone that had become the most dangerous patch of ground in Eastern Europe. His goal was simple on paper but lethal in execution: to slip into Russian-held territory and gather information, while tricking the enemy into believing he was one of their own. What unfolded after this daring deception would spiral into a brutal confrontation that told not just the story of one soldier, but the struggle of an entire nation fighting to keep its sovereignty intact. Hello everyone, welcome back to the World Conflict Monitor channel. Please subscribe my channel. Today we dive into an extraordinary episode from the war in Ukraine, a story that shows courage, cunning, and the razor-thin line between life and death when deception is used as a weapon. To understand this incident, we'll break it down the way we analyze high-stakes encounters, looking at the exterior, the interior, the performance, the safety mechanisms, the unique selling points of such tactics, the cost, and finally, the larger conclusion. Before that, let's quickly summarize the story at the center of this explanation. A Ukrainian soldier, trained in special reconnaissance, assumed the identity of a Russian fighter during a forward operation. Using the disguise, he infiltrated Russian positions, attempting to mislead enemy troops, gather intel, and disrupt coordination. But soon, his cover began to slip. The moment of exposure turned into a bloody clash, one that revealed not only his bravery but also the terrifying consequences of playing this high-stakes masquerade. That summary gives us the outline. Now let's unpack the layers. From the outside, the exterior of this operation looked convincing. The soldier had carefully replicated the Russian kit, the helmet, the camouflage pattern, the patches that gave an immediate illusion of authenticity. He understood that in war, the smallest visual detail can mean the difference between acceptance and suspicion. Russian units were known for the discipline in identifying friend from foe, so his appearance had to withstand a quick glance under stress. The exterior deception wasn't only in clothing but also in posture and movement. He had studied how Russian troops marched, how they held their rifles, even the way they slung the gear. This was no mere costume, it was a performance down to the muscle memory, designed to pass the enemy's scrutiny in fleeting seconds. In that environment, where ruined buildings created shifting shadows and where paranoia ran high, blending in visually was the first barrier he had to cross. Moving to the interior, this was where the disguise was most fragile. Inside the enemy ranks, the soldier found himself not surrounded by faceless figures but by men who joked, muttered, and carried themselves with the heavy burden of a prolonged campaign. The interior of the operation was defined not by uniforms but by conversations, codes, and subtle cultural cues. To stay alive, he had to limit his speech, relying on nods, short Russian phrases, and silence that seemed purposeful rather than awkward. The interior experience was brief and tense, because every moment stretched like an hour. A single wrong word or accent slip would expose him, and unlike the exterior, the interior environment allowed no chance to hide once suspicion was raised. This short but crucial stage became the razor edge where the plan balanced between success and collapse. Now, when we talk about performance, the soldier's actions showed both incredible strength and inevitable fragility. His performance wasn't just in fooling the Russians for minutes, it was in achieving objectives under disguise. He managed to overhear discussions, spot the positioning of equipment, and mark mentally where reinforcements were being staged. His ability to extract value from the ruse before being discovered demonstrated high performance under unbearable stress. Yet, The performance had limits. When pressed into direct interaction, the cracks appeared. One soldier asked him a casual question, expecting a fluent response. His hesitation was enough to plant suspicion. Performance in such operations is about endurance, and endurance in deception is brutally finite. Still, the mission had already yielded intelligence that would later help Ukrainian units anticipate Russian moves. Safety features in this daring gambit were almost non-existent. Unlike a soldier in standard combat gear with backup, a disguised infiltrator carries the double risk of being shot by the enemy if discovered and being accidentally targeted by his own side if identified incorrectly. To reduce this risk, he carried hidden markers, small signals meant to identify him to Ukrainian observers. A folded cloth tucked in a certain way, a radio channel prearranged, these were his only safety nets. But in truth, safety was an illusion here. The brutal fact was that once exposed, his only protection was his weapon, his training, and the chaos he could unleash to survive. This operation was not designed to keep him safe but to test how much risk could be borne for the sake of disrupting the adversary. Looking at the unique selling points of this tactic, the daring use of deception highlighted both creativity and desperation. The tactic allowed one man to momentarily turn the enemy's strength, its numbers and organization, against itself. By pretending to belong, he forced Russian soldiers to reveal things they would have hidden from an outsider. The unique aspect here was the psychological shock. When the ruse collapsed and they realized a Ukrainian was in their midst, the panic and fury that followed disrupted their coordination. Even if the infiltrator did not escape, the disruption alone delivered value to his side. It demonstrated that psychological warfare can take unexpected forms, not only through propaganda or drones, but even through human disguise on the ground. If we talk about the price of such an operation, the cost is enormous. On a personal level, the price was the soldier's own life being placed on the line in a way more dangerous than regular combat. On a broader scale, the cost of failure would have been intelligence compromised, morale damaged, and propaganda handed to the other side. But the price also reflects in strategic terms. These operations are not repeatable at scale because the enemy learns. The more often such tactics are attempted, the quicker recognition spreads, making them harder to pull off. So the price isn't only immediate risk, but the diminishing returns as the shock value fades. Finally, in conclusion, this brutal episode illustrates the razor-thin boundaries of deception in warfare. A single soldier, masked in enemy colors, was able to penetrate, observe, and disrupt, proving that ingenuity remains a powerful weapon even in a conflict dominated by artillery, drones, and heavy machinery. Yet it also shows the human cost. The moment of exposure was savage. The fight that followed left no doubt that deception, once broken, invites merciless retribution. The story reminds us that the Ukraine war is not only a clash of armies but a theater of individuals making desperate choices, where courage and cunning sometimes win a fleeting advantage at a terrible personal price. And when the dust settles, what remains is a lesson. Deception is powerful, but survival depends on knowing when the mask will break. The brutality of what happens next is not just in the bloodshed, but in the haunting recognition that such gambits can only delay, not define, the larger course of war.